Okay, so hello and welcome to the Post-Mortem for the Superman review. If you haven't watched that video, there should be a card or something near the start here to link you to that so you can watch that before you watch this. This video is going to have 4 parts to it. It should be smaller, but 4 chapters. It'll just be in and out, hopefully less than an hour. We're going to be discussing in this video some mischaracterizations I may have made, the nature of character, what it means to be a producer, which that section is a bit of an unstructured rant, so I'm just warning you there, and then what caused me to make my big review in the first place. And I have it organized like that because even though I could start off at the beginning, which is what made me make the video, I'd rather start off with mischaracterizations. That way we can build up to the more tangentially academic part of the video, I guess. Oops, I knocked something over. Oh no. So something from the first video. I feel like I may have unfairly characterized Leota Adebayo's discussion with Vigilante halfway through season 1. The scene where she very bluntly manipulates him into getting himself into jail to bump off Augie Smith, who is Chris's father. Namely, entirely, it's because I suggested that this scene exists purely for the convenience of viewers with fried out dopamine receptors. And I want to say that that opinion that I have still stands on the scene, because, that's what the function of the scene is. It catches people up who aren't exactly paying attention. But secondly, I want to go into Peacemaker just a bit so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from on this take. Peacemaker ruminates on the destructive influence parents can have on their children, right? Augie wanted Chris and his brother to become the white supremacist envoy that he was forced out of doing, and Amanda Waller's grooming her daughter, Adebayo, into becoming her eventual replacement in the government systems she manages, right? I think that's a fair take. I don't see how you could argue against that in good faith. And the desperation for Augie reciprocating his love is what keeps Chris in his orbit, and Waller giving her daughter a temp job is what lets her keep Adebayo under her thumb, right? In the show, Adebayo's character doesn't really strike me as someone who enjoys playing the spy master in the same way Waller does. She seems to resent her mother's work, and if we read her expressions just a hair differently in her conversation with Vigilante, she dislikes having to manipulate others to do what she needs to be done. But this, of course, assumes she's gifted with the same natural talent for gamesmanship as her mother. And if we take that as fact, we come away with what I feel is the intended read of Adebayo's character, where Chris is able to finally break free from his father's expectations through the violence he was conditioned towards. Adebayo is likewise able to maneuver out of Waller's influence by taking advantage of the press conference to disrobe her mother of her secrets. We have these parallel storylines where these two characters use their traumatic upbringings, for lack of a better word, as sources of power to break out of those expectations. This lands us and Adebayo in the very uneasy ground of Season 2, where Season 1's Adebayo was adamant that she's only taking the job to support herself and her wife Kia as they save money to open their own pet-related business. Season 2's Adebayo, still going by her married name despite being in the middle of a separation, is embracing the quote-unquote security consultant skills she has quote picked up and quote refined over her experiences in the first season. Now, for what it's worth, I found it surprisingly mature of Gunn to have Adebayo recognize that, despite the deep love she has for her wife Kia, her desire to further enmesh herself into spy mastery as a force for good isn't something she's willing to give up to save their marriage, and they finally finalize their separation on somewhat mutual terms. Credit where it's due. But I find it difficult to square these two versions of the character. Much in the same way I found it difficult to, even in retrospect, see her discussion with Vigilante as anything other than Adrian is so dense that he won't understand Chris's issues unless I tell him point blank. There's too much that would have had to have happened off-screen between seasons for me to think that Adebayo is now gung-ho about staying in the spy game, and too little happens on-screen to make me believe that she's even any good at it. Now, that being said, I do not intend to I don't care to correct any potential mischaracterizations about Hawkgirl. I defy you to name me one line of her dialogue that isn't, "That's not our name," or I'm not like Superman. Now, on a tangential, far more personal note, I feel like Angela Spica is low-key kind of racist, and I had no room to put that in the main review. Like, the way she's written is just like, damn, I have a Latina character, and I don't know. I need to do the impression again. Damn, I have a Latina character, and I don't know how to signal this to the audience. I got it. She'll say mierda and hijo de puta and K, and her last name will be Spick. Okay, I'm going a little far there, but you know, we do use Spanish more than just for cursing, and if James Gunn cared about presenting three-dimensional characters, you'd know she's Hispanic through ways other than just little Spanish curse words. Now, I want to talk here about the difference between types of characters. The undeniable protagonist of the film is Superman. His deuteragonists are Mr. Terrific and Lois Lane, and his tritagonist is Metamorpho. Lex Luthor is the antagonist of the film, and if we repurpose this character triad for his story, his deuteragonist and tritagonist are the engineer and the president of Baravia, respectively. Now, I feel these assignments are pretty self-evident, so let's move on now to what has been the main point of contention in my other social media conversations about the film, which is Malik being used as a prop. For Malik as a prop, we have to discuss the difference between minor and supporting/side characters. Both terms, all three terms, are used to describe characters who have no real impact on the plot, and instead act as supporting functions to the story or the main characters at hand. Supporting and side characters comprise the bulk of Superman 2025's cast, as they should. Jimmy Olsen and the rest of the Daily Planet newsroom, Crypto, 2/3 of the Justice Gang, Ultraman, Luthor Corps staff, Eve Teschmacher, and the Planet Watch goons all count as supporting or side characters. They're necessary to the plot, but don't really require any development, and any character with a similar background or skill set could easily slot into their role if needed. I don't really want to waste more word count on this, so you should, hopefully, be able to infer why I consider the Baravian president and Metamorpho to be tritagonists, and why I consider Ultraman to be just a support character. Minor characters are characters who may or may not be named, but who the plot can ignore or cut without issue. These include people like Reggie the Food Vendor, the Squirrel, the Interdimensional Inmates, and Rick Flag Sr., who all count as minor characters, as the movie would continue as normal if they were unnamed or didn't exist. Flag Sr. especially feels like a stand-in for Amanda Waller in the movie, and especially so in Peacemaker Season 2, but that's neither here nor there. Now, Malik should be a supporting character, given his narrative position and impact on other characters in the film. But as I discussed before, the muddied text of his portrayal makes it so nearly anyone could slot into Malik's narrative role. Weirdly enough, earlier drafts of the script contained a Malik with slightly more opinions and character than the theatrical cut of the film, and I feel like we can infer from this that Gunn wanted Malik to be someone important, and knew he should be someone important, but lacked either the knowledge or confidence to put him on the exact level of importance that the narrative asks of him. It is my reasoned assertion that this lack of knowledge is what degraded Malik into his status as a prop. Put him on the same level as a dead mother whose demise is what allows her sons to leave home, or on the level of the Superman robots, who provide low-stakes comedy, tension, and exposition. My personal opinion is that the person who Lex kills should have been someone unknown to the audience. A random person on the street who gathered around Superman. I feel like this would reward an attentive audience, make Superman seem like someone who truly cares for all of Metropolis' citizens, and also returns Malik to his intended original role as a supporting character. And just to get a bit ranty about that, like, I can't say that there's, like, mountains of potential for Malik, but, like, you could keep him around as a guy, like, someone who Superman just gets lunch from, or who's, like, there's, I don't know. Now we're kind of in the I smacked my microphone again. Okay, so now we get to the third part of this post-mortem, and it's a little ranty, so just bear in mind with that. Something I failed to really properly address in the original video, despite including it within the video description, is why are people so eager to defend Superman 2025 despite it being, fairly objectively average? I think it's fair to start this assessment by ignoring Gunn's oldest works and honing in specifically on his big two superhero catalog, as that's where this discussion really begins. And despite their own popularity and audiences, none of those prior works really truly matter to this discussion at hand here. We don't need to be talking about Slither or James Gunn's PG porn. Now, it would be kind of silly for me to pretend that the Guardians of the Galaxy series has had no cultural impact or any kind of audience. But I do think it is, at least in part, fair to assume that the impact of this series is largely the result of an underinformed audience. There's a quote by Ursula K. Le Guin, which I'm quite fond of, where she makes an analogy between buttered toast and gourmet cuisine to undercut the glowing critical response to Harry Potter. It's a bit of a long quote, but I'll do my best here. A writer sets out to write science fiction but isn't familiar with the genre, hasn't read what's been written. This is a fairly common situation because science fiction is known to sell well, but as a sub-literary genre, it is not supposed to be worth study. What's to learn? It doesn't occur to the novice that a genre is a genre because it has a field and a focus of its own, its appropriate and particular tools, rules, and techniques for handling the material, its traditions, and its experienced, appreciative readers. That it is, in fact, a literature. Ignoring all this, our novice is just about to reinvent the wheel, the spaceship, the space alien, and the mad scientist with cries of innocent wonder. The cries will not be echoed by the readers. Readers familiar with that genre have met the spaceship, the alien, and the mad scientist before. They know more about them than the writer does. In the same way, critics who set out to talk about a fantasy novel without having read any fantasy since they were 8, and in ignorance of the history and extensive theory of fantasy literature, will make fools of themselves because they don't know how to read the book. They have no contextual information to tell them what its tradition is, where it's coming from, what it's trying to do, what it does. This was liberally proved when the first Harry Potter book came out, and a lot of literary reviewers ran around shrieking about the incredible originality of the book. This originality was an artifact of the reviewers' blank ignorance of its genres, children's fantasy and the British boarding school story, plus the fact that they hadn't read a fantasy since they were 8. It was pitiful. It was like watching some TV gourmet chef eat a piece of buttered toast and squeal, "But this is delicious! Unheard of! Where has it been all my life?" The initial response to this quote might be to hone in on J.K. Rowling and claim this as a dig against her work. And to be honest, I think it might very well be a dig at her work, since this is a quote from a speech given in 2004, a good 5 books into the Harry Potter series. But I'm also writing this in the unending collapse of Rowling's public goodwill some 20 years later. But I more feel the intent of the quote is to say that Harry Potter is a simple example of the genres it works in, and its reputation was inflated by people unfamiliar with those genres. This, by and large, is an opinion I hold for most of the fans of James Gunn's superhero catalog. Now, most is a key word here, as Gunn has his fans within the comics industry, who are persons of authority and knowledge who have seen far more adaptations come and go than you and I have, and likely also has comics superfans who are running defense for him simply for the love of the game. But, as I said in my earlier video, film adaptations will largely end up being seen by people unfamiliar with the source material, so I feel like this is still a relevant point to make. As pretentious as I fear it sounds, most people willing to go to bat for James Gunn are also going to be the least familiar with comics as a whole, just as a matter of probability. And this is a similar problem which occurs within the mecha genre of anime, specifically when related to the series Neon Genesis Evangelion. It tends to primarily be labeled as a deconstruction of mecha, but the truth is that Neon Genesis Evangelion doesn't provide a deconstruction of those genre tropes, or if it does, it's not enough to call the whole work a deconstruction. Deconstructive, maybe, if I'm being generous, but the elements that tend to be pointed to by audience members as signs of its deconstruction are actually just conventions central to the genre. What NGE is a deconstruction of, if anything, is of stock character archetypes, of the tsundere and the kudere and the mature age gap love interest, among others. To call NGE a deconstruction of mecha, however, is to reveal ignorance of even the most surface-level conventions of the genre. In a similar fashion, to call James Gunn a visionary is to ignore the century of works which led to him, both in comics and in film. And this is why my own assessment of New Sincerity in Gunn's Superman focuses primarily on Collins' genre-specific definition, and we'll get to why that is later. I also think an underdiscussed element of Gunn's oeuvre is that it has undergone a rather marked change since he took over co-ownership of DC Studios. A good chunk of Foxcade's recent video on Adi Shankar, great video by the way, you should go watch it, goes into what the responsibilities of a producer entail. And since taking his promotion, the bulk of Gunn's work has naturally shifted from directing to producing. And we like to think of the director having the final say on set, since they tend to have say in choosing the casting director or the director of photography or the editors, but the producer's the one who holds the purse strings. They hire the director and the writers and everything needed to get the film in motion. It's not by coincidence that Marvel Studios is the sole/primary production company on every project they've done. This is because it leaves room for Marvel, and only Marvel, to veto the director when necessary for the health of the production. And Gunn's best work seems to have been when he had these checks and balances in place. But now he is the head of the studio, and he is also the producer, or co-producer, of every project that's coming out. Now, as I said before, Peacemaker Season 2 has massive off-screen changes to its characterization between the two seasons, but Season 2 also forces in a slow-burn romance plot, which I feel, and I feel a lot of other people feel as well, which goes against the arcs of the characters involved. Creature Commandos feels like an attempt to ground the spacefaring found family adventures of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but it lacks the same chemistry. And this is on top of having abysmal needle drops, which is like just the worst in his entire catalog, which is frustrating because I really like basically every band in the show. At the very least, you know, Malavita and Not a Crime should be swapped around, and anyone with a brain would know that, but that's... I'm getting angry at myself. And then we have The Suicide Squad, which he did not produce, but now that he's the head of the studio, he has retroactive authority to include it. It has certain superfluous elements in it. The title cards, the excessive gore for the sake of gore, which very nearly made it into Superman 2025, and you can see like some little moments where that kind of philosophy of direction is kept in. Finally, we have Rick Flag Sr., who, while having a serviceable actor in Frank Grillo, I have no problems with him really, his character is now an integral part of the cinematic universe for no real reason beyond being integral to one of James Gunn's favorite toys in Peacemaker. You know, to close out this section, the unfortunate truth that I feel Gunn's audience needs to accept is that he's not your Blorbo anymore. He's not some edgy director whose rough edges are being sanded off by the mouse. He's a 60-year-old C-suite executive whose decisions are largely informed by his nostalgia for the DC Bullet era, which began when he was 10 and ended when he was 39. I get it though. You know, I get it. I really do. Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Joss Whedon Justice League sucked, and the Snyder Cut is 4 hours long. Superman Returns didn't really offer much as an adaptation. You wanted this to be the good Superman story. I wanted this to be the good Superman story. You almost lost James Gunn between Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and 3, and you want him to have his success. You want the DCU to thrive. I also want the DCU to thrive. But Superman 2025 performed roughly as well as Man of Steel did. You, all of you, are going to have to start getting comfortable throwing appropriate barbs at Gunn if you want better material to come out of his studio. Bad faith arguments should always be interrogated and tossed out. But it's also bad faith to pretend Gunn is great just because he's great. You know, dig into the genre and know it. Is he making buttered toast or flaky croissants? My prediction is that come 2027, when Gunn and Safran's contracts are up and Warner Bros. Discovery has been acquired by whatever equally soulless husk wins the current bidding war, one of those two men will be either demoted or fully dropped from the CEO role to save money. And you need to hope it's Gunn. Okay, now for the question of the hour, which is, why would I ever bother writing an essay about why Superman doesn't ascribe to a particular definition of new sincerity? The honest answer is that I was browsing Wikipedia one night and I didn't think it was fair to add Superman to the list of film examples without even providing so much as a corroborating opinion as a source. I also thought that, based on how the film treats its own genre conventions, it wasn't correct to add it to the list either. And during the process of recording the review, I was led down another rabbit hole as it pertains to New Sincerity, which is that, in short, the film criticism section of the Wikipedia article, which was the launching pad for my review, is deeply and woefully misleading. And by my understanding, the cited examples are working off of no less than 5 competing definitions and appraisals of New Sincerity as it relates to film criticism. The first definition is the Jim Collins header, which I feel also mischaracterizes his article. And that's something I talked about a little in the review. Collins' definition of New Sincerity, in my view, is meant to be fairly strictly applied to genre film. According to Collins, we all exist within the media array. And whether you embrace or reject the array is what puts you closer to or further from Eclectic Irony or New Sincerity by his usages of the terms. I'd even argue that you could go so far as to arrange his view into a Punnett square of what does the film do more of, reject or embrace the array, and are generic references more across genres to fit narrative roles or within the genre being portrayed, with Eclectic Irony in the top left and New Sincerity in the bottom right. The fifth definition of New Sincerity is fairly simple to understand. It is the return to sincere expression from ironic expression, an alternative definition for what may be considered post-postmodernism. The second, third, and fourth definitions of New Sincerity all share at their core what I call the standard definition. That is to say that New Sincerity is a term interchangeable with metamodernism/post-irony, wherein a work vacillates between its ironic and sincere phases which serve to strengthen each other. However, the third and fourth definitions offer additional responses to Collins' initial definition of New Sincerity within film. Warren Buckland and James McDowell both argue, along somewhat different approaches, that Collins' quote, New Sincerity is simply just regular old sincerity. But the former characterizes it as driven by nostalgia, while the latter notes it lacks any room for irony or cynicism. Allard Dendulk's fourth definition, I would argue, goes even farther, while additionally characterizing Collins' definition as being one of uncritical naivety, not merely driven by nostalgia. To quote Dendulk, New Sincerity cinema represents a clear striving for the simultaneity, the conjunction of absorption and reflexivity. The sensibility in question can be seen to offer a reflexivity that explicitly thematizes the conventions and artifice of cinema without robbing the absorption into reality and the meaningfulness of the film's characters and story world of its affirmative force. This self-consciousness does not serve merely to create an ironic distance from what the film portrays. Rather, it signals an awareness that such artifice and conventions indeed structure films, and in fact also are reality, and that our meaningful relation to film and reality is therefore not directly given, but has to be actively reflected upon and reaffirmed, in line with sincerity as the reflective resumption of consciousness's immersion in the world. End quote. In short, and I hope I'm summarizing correctly as I'm not all that familiar with Sartre, New Sincerity films make no bones about being fake, doing so in order to draw the audience further into the story, to provoke and promote active engagement with the work. R. Barton Palmer, working within the constraints of genre film much the same way Collins did, instead offers the assessment that both elements of Collins' dichotomy are focused on recovering the past, despite their differing approaches to doing so. Palmer further connects Collins' work to critic Richard Martin's assessment of the Neo-Noir genre, which in turn offered up additional genre-responsive labels of revisionist and formulaic, where Martin's revisionism, quote, a return to textual depth instead of just a play of surfaces, meets the same goal of providing missing harmony as Collins' New Sincerity does. New Sincerity, therefore, in Palmer Martin's view, is very distinct from Collins' pursuit of lost purity, i.e. the pursuit of the emotional core of the genre, rather than its intellectual core, which is what Palmer Martin is after. Then, of course, we have the bastard child definition provided by Jesse Thorne in Maximum Fun, which appears at least once in a film review of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, again maintaining its anti-intellectual stance of the pursuit of unabashed enjoyment. Sorry about that, there's kids outside. Now, by my count, that leads to 7 competing definitions within that same article, But with only one being in the foreground, it lends the impression that every film on the list is being called New Sincerity in accordance with one man's specific view. And unfortunately, it's with that framework in mind that I initially approached my appraisal of Superman 2025 as not belonging to the canon of New Sincerity film. I'm not going to argue against my assessment of the film either, as I feel it's as accurate as it can be when working specifically within the 32-year-old lens of analysis provided by Collins. But still, it is here, at the closure of this post-mortem, that I ask perhaps my least useful rhetorical question. Do you still think Superman 2025 counts as New Sincerity? When you sat down in theaters to watch it, popcorn in one hand, soda in the other, were you thinking about the genre conventions of the superhero film and whether or not Superman's generic references were within or without genre? Do you think the film actively swung between periods of ironic detachment and sincere engagement? Did you think that Superman was being driven by nostalgia? Did you think Superman lacked cynicism? Did you think Superman was upfront about his status as a film and provoked your active engagement? Did you think Superman dug into the intellectual framework of the superhero genre? Did you find Superman to be popcorn blockbuster fun? Look deep within yourself and ask, is Superman sincere? Thank you.